What is your view of this war?
I think when you call it a war, you're doing a disservice to the people who are having their limbs blown off by some of the most advanced technical weaponry on the planet. It is a genocide and it is disgusting. And it doesn't matter which side of the political spectrum you fall on. When you observe a genocide in front of your very eyes, you should be disgusted.
Which side is waging genocide?
The Israelis are genociding the Palestinians, and you know it as well as everybody else does. Well, then it seems like your bosses are not allowing you to know it.
This goes to something we've said many, many times. People who hate the state of Israel will see all sorts of horrific things everywhere. You know, it was December 8th, I think it was, 2016, when America, Britain, using the world's most advanced weaponry with their own commandos, helping the Iraqi army to liberate Mosul from ISIS, and they bombed the Al-Salem hospital. Right? During that fighting, I think it was 11,500 people died. 2,500 were ISIS fighters. 9,000 were civilians. Includes, I think, up to 2,000 civilians may have died from ISIS themselves. The others, almost for sure, killed by coalition bombing and by Iraqi forces fighting to liberate their people. Does anybody use the word genocide about that? You'd need an insane asylum to say, if they wanted genocide, they'd have bombed the whole of Mosul. They didn't want genocide. They wanted to get rid of ISIS. There was human shields. They did the absolute best they could do. That's a normal moral compass. Anybody who's humane could see that ISIS are the sick people who want to slaughter millions of civilians and put hundreds of thousands of their own co-religionists in the line of fire to basically say, look, we want to kill millions of you. If you get us, there's hundreds of thousands in the way. And the Western powers and the Iraqi National Army at the time was trying desperately to hit them in the bunkers with minimizing the killing of civilians, and thousands of civilians, including thousands of children, died. ISIS were the clear genociders. The Iraqi army, the American, the British, they may have made mistakes they can learn from, but they were the moral heroes in that conflict, and almost everybody's moral compass would tell them that. In fact, if anybody else was fighting ISIS or Hamas, and tragically there were thousands of civilians dying, but they evacuated 1 million civilians. Israel got 1 million civilians out of Gaza, out of the firing line. They rescued them from serious danger, given there's a war going on. That is the opposite of genocide. They leave it to them to tell them where the main attacks are going to be. That's the opposite of genocide. That's like Iraq and like America and like Britain fighting against ISIS. And yet when it comes to Israel, okay, Andrew Tate, I'm not the biggest fan of his moral compass in the first place, but so many people's moral compass just spins in a weird direction. And they suddenly, they can't tell right from wrong. It's tragic to have war. It's tragic to have urban war. Urban war always involves thousands of civilian losses unless the civilians are evacuated. Then you can save the civilians. If they're in there, especially if you've got people fighting, jihadis fighting with human shields like this, it's not possible to get zero. But here's the point. If you would ask Hamas what is the ideal number of dead Israelis, they would say at least the entire Jewish population of Israel, 9 million people. If you ask them what's the ideal number of Palestinian civilians die here, it's the number it takes to put the world against Israel so that Hamas survives. That might be 100,000, whatever number they come up with. You ask Israel, what is the ideal number of civilians dead on both sides? And I could tell you this, knowing Israelis from all sides of the political spectrum, at least 95%, and probably a lot more than that, would say zero.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I want to add a sentence.
Sure.
And I think this type of grotesque demonization of clearly, in any other context, any other conflict, you would understand it's the tragedy of civilian casualties in war with human shielding. When Israel's involved, genocide. I mean, it's just such a horrific slander. I think this is a case of a moral compass spinning in such a weird and warped way. It can only come from a deep, deep hatred of Israel. I think it's the only possible way anybody could begin to think this way.